Do you believe someone could burn through $77 million over jealousy? She thought her power, her beauty, her grip on the CEO's heart would shield her forever. But some traps are set so quietly, so legally, that nobody hears the click when they lock. I left the company in silence. Then one night, everything collapsed: the board, the systems, and her, all because she forgot one simple truth. The person who builds the machine always keeps the key. My name is Madison Cole, and for 5 years, I was the invisible architect behind a Veritex miracle growth story. 32 years old, MIT dropout, turned self-taught systems engineer, the kind of person who dreams in code and wakes up at 3 a.m. with solutions to problems nobody else even knows exist yet. The annual performance review meeting was scheduled for 2:30 p.m. on a Thursday that smelled like rain and corporate betrayal. I remember the exact shade of burgundy lipstick Sienna Hayes wore that day. Dior Rouge, probably. The kind that costs more than what most engineers spend on lunch in a month. She sat across from me in conference room 7, her manicured nails drumming against the glass table while she pretended to review my file. "Madison," she began, drawing out my name like she was tasting something bitter. "Your technical skills are adequate." Adequate. I'd rebuilt their entire cloud infrastructure from scratch, written the algorithms that reduced data processing time by 87%, saved them from 3 potential system crashes that would have cost millions. But to Sienna Hayes, director of operations and unofficial queen of Veritech by virtue of warming our CEO's bed, I was merely adequate. She slid the bonus envelope across the table with 2 fingers, like it might contaminate her. Inside was a check for $1,500. The junior developers got $5,000 minimum. The sales team averaged $20,000. But me, the person who literally held the company's digital skeleton together, $1,500. "Your energy is low," Sienna continued, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "You don't inspire. This company needs warriors, not—" She paused, pretending to search for the right word. "Maintenance workers preserving legacy systems." The fluorescent lights hummed above us. Through the glass walls, I could see my colleagues bent over their screens, oblivious to the execution happening in plain sight. Ryan Parker walked by, that eager puppy of a project manager who couldn't code his way out of a paper bag, but knew how to laugh at Sienna's jokes. He'd probably get my job within the month. I wanted to tell her about the nights I'd spent untangling the mess her last warrior had created, the back doors I'd closed, the security vulnerabilities I'd patched while she was posting motivational quotes on LinkedIn about disrupting the industry. I wanted to show her the dependency tree I'd mapped, how every critical system in this company traced back to code I'd written, architecture I'd designed, problems I'd solved. Instead, I picked up the envelope. "Thank you for the feedback." She leaned back, satisfied. This was what she wanted: submission. Acknowledgement of her power. She'd been circling me for months, ever since I'd corrected her in that product meeting about API limitations. CEO Derek Vaughan had laughed, said I was right, and Sienna's face had frozen in that particular way that meant someone had just made her list. "We're restructuring the engineering department," she announced, as if it were an afterthought. "We need fresh perspectives, people who understand that technology serves business, not the other way around." Translation: "You're out, but I'm going to make you quit so we don't have to pay severance." I stood up, envelope in hand. "I understand completely." "Good. Oh, and Madison," she called out as I reached the door. "Make sure you document all your processes before you transition. We wouldn't want any knowledge gaps." I turned back and gave her the smallest smile. Everything important is already documented. Every algorithm, every system, every single line of critical code. It's all properly registered and protected. She didn't understand what I meant. Not yet. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply went back to my desk and began my final masterpiece. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with the dedication of a surgeon preparing for the most delicate operation of their career, every morning at 5:45 a.m., before anyone else arrived. I refined the decision spine, the algorithmic backbone that orchestrated every data flow, every API call, every critical process that kept a Veritech running. It was beautiful code, elegant in its complexity, the kind of architecture that other engineers would study for years if they ever got to see it. But they wouldn't, not without my permission. The genius wasn't in what I built, it was in how I protected it. I registered Decision Spine under my personal IP portfolio, filed with the U.S. Copyright Office at 11:23 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Every function, every method, every innovative approach I developed was now legally mine. The company could use it. Of course I wasn't a monster, but there was a catch. Buried in subsection 4.3c of our internal compliance framework. A clause I'd helped write 2 years ago when nobody cared about the boring legal stuff. Any proprietary logic designated as IP-sensitive requires original author sign-off before production deployment or significant modification. I encrypted the core modules with a key derivation function that would take centuries to crack, not destroying anything that would be illegal, just protecting my intellectual property, as was my right. Then I added a small note in the internal dashboard, innocuous enough that Ryan Parker and his team of fresh perspectives would probably ignore it. Pending compliance review, primary logic owner sign-off required. In the repository, I left everything they needed: documentation, flowcharts, even helpful comments. But the actual decision spine logic that lived in a secure IP vault, accessible only through my personal credentials, protected by legal frameworks that even Sienna's relationship with the CEO couldn't override. My last act was creating a special binder, physical, old school, the kind of thing digital natives like Ryan would never think to look for. Inside, I placed printed copies of the IP registration, the compliance clause, the architectural diagrams, and a simple flowchart showing how every critical system depended on Decision Spine. I locked it in my desk drawer, bottom left, underneath old conference swag and expired protein bars. Carl from the architecture team had a key he'd borrowed it once to grab aspirin and never returned it. I was counting on his curiosity when things started falling apart. Tara Mitchell found me in the parking garage on my last day, tears in her eyes. "This is bullshit. Madison, everyone knows you're the only reason this place hasn't imploded." "It's fine," I told her, loading my cardboard box into my beat-up Honda. "Really? Sienna's already moved Ryan into your office. She's calling it Project Genesis, a complete transformation of our technical infrastructure." Tara's voice dripped with disgust. "She's presenting it to the board next month." "Let her," I said, and meant it. Tara grabbed my arm. "Madison, what did you do?" "Nothing illegal, nothing unethical. I just made sure my work was properly attributed and protected. If they want to use my code, my architecture, my solutions, they just need to ask nicely." "They'll never do that. Sienna would rather burn $77 million than admit she needs me." I finished. "Yes, I'm counting on it." I drove away at 6:15 p.m., watching a Veritech shrink in my rearview mirror. In 3 weeks, they'd begin deploying Project Genesis. In 4 weeks, they'd hit the first errors. In 5 weeks, the board would start asking questions. And in 6 weeks, Sienna Hayes would learn that humiliating the person who built your house meant living with whatever surprises they'd left in the foundation. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't need to. I just made sure that what was mine stayed mine, and what was theirs was useless without me. Every emperor believes their empire will last forever. Right until the moment they realized their throne was rented, and the lease just expired. The week after I left, Sienna moved like a conquering general through the engineering floor. She wore her power like Chanel No. 5, expensive, overwhelming, and impossible to ignore. Ryan Parker, her newly crowned lead systems architect, followed her around with an iPad, nodding at everything she said like one of those dashboard bobbleheads. "We're going to revolutionize how this company operates," she announced at the all-hands meeting. According to Tara's texts, no more gatekeepers, no more single points of failure, no more dwelling in the past. That last line was directed at anyone who might question why Madison Cole. The person who'd built half their infrastructure was suddenly gone. But nobody questioned Sienna Hayes. Not when she had Derek Vaughn's ear every night and his signature on every decision. Project Genesis launched with all the fanfare of a Silicon Valley IPO. New Slack channels with rocket ship emojis. Motivational posters about disruption and innovation. Team-building exercises where everyone had to share their transformation goals. Ryan hired 3 junior developers fresh out of boot camp, kids who knew just enough JavaScript to be dangerous and not enough architecture to understand what they were breaking. The executive team scheduled the big reveal for their largest clients, a $77 million contract renewal that hinged on demonstrating their next-generation infrastructure capabilities. The presentation deck was gorgeous. Animated transitions, gradient backgrounds, inspirational quotes from Steve Jobs. Everything except an understanding of how the actual system worked. Madison built everything so complicated, Ryan complained in a Slack message that Tara screenshot for me. Half this code doesn't even have comments. It's like she was trying to job secure herself. If only he knew. Every line was documented. Every function had comments. They just couldn't access the core logic that made it all work, the decision spine that orchestrated the beautiful symphony of data flows and process management. All they had were the sheets of music with no understanding of how to conduct. Sienna pushed forward. She had Ryan's team working 18-hour days, pumping them full of energy drinks and false promises about stock options. They rewrote the front end 3 times. They migrated databases. They containerized everything that moved, and Kubernetes'd everything that didn't. They did everything except understand that without decision spine's orchestration logic, they were just rearranging furniture in a house with no foundation. The CEO backed every decision. During their private dinners at Morton's Steakhouse, Sienna would feed him progress reports between bites of filet mignon. "We're removing all of Madison's unnecessary complexity," she'd say, according to his assistant who still liked me enough to gossip. "Creating a cleaner, more scalable architecture." Derek would nod, sign off on more budget, and toast to their innovative leadership. He was a money guy, a smooth talker who could charm investors and board members, but couldn't tell a REST API from a restaurant menu. As long as Sienna kept him happy in the bedroom and the boardroom, he didn't ask hard questions. Meanwhile, I was 3 states away, sitting in my sister's guest room, teaching myself pottery and watching everything unfold through Tara's updates. I'd turned down 7 job offers, each one more lucrative than the last. Amazon wanted me. Google called twice, but I was waiting for the moment when arrogance met reality. "They're planning to deploy next week." Tara messaged me at 11:30 p.m. on a Sunday. "Ryan says everything is tested and ready. Sienna's already planning the victory party." I rolled a piece of clay between my fingers, feeling its cool, malleable surface. In 5 days, they'd flip the switch on Project Genesis. In 5 days, they'd discover that all their innovation was built on a foundation they didn't own and couldn't access. In 5 days, Sienna Hayes would learn the difference between having power and understanding power. "Let them," I replied. "Make sure Carl knows about that locked drawer if things get interesting." "Madison, are you sure about this?" I shaped the clay into a small bowl, imperfect but functional. "I didn't do anything wrong. Tara, I just protected my intellectual property. If they want to use my work, all they have to do is ask." But we both knew they never would. Sienna's ego wouldn't allow it. She'd rather watch everything burn than admit she needed the low-energy maintenance worker she'd discarded like trash. The first crack appeared at 9:47 a.m. on a Monday morning. According to Tara's panicked text, "Error 5004 everywhere. Ryan's about to cry." I was at the farmer's market, selecting heirloom tomatoes, when my phone started buzzing with updates. The deployment had started at 9 a.m. sharp, with Sienna standing behind Ryan like a general watching troops advance. For exactly 47 minutes, everything seemed fine. Then Decision Spine's absence made itself known. Error 5004. Core logic validation failed. It cascaded through their systems like dominoes falling in slow motion. API endpoints returned null. Data pipelines stuttered and died. The beautiful new front end Ryan's team had built, kept sending requests into a void that no longer had the intelligence to respond. "Just roll back," Sienna commanded. According to the play-by-play Tara was providing from her desk, "Go back to the previous version." But there was no previous version. They'd gutted Madison Cole's architecture, torn out what they thought was unnecessary complexity, replaced it with what Ryan called clean modern solutions. They'd burned their bridges while standing on them. The QA team leader, Jennifer, raised her hand in the war room at 10:15 a.m. "The error isn't in our new code. It's like something's missing, some core process that should be running but isn't." "That's impossible," Ryan insisted, sweat staining his vintage startup t-shirt. "We mapped every function. We rewrote everything that needed rewriting." "Did you check the container orchestration?" Sienna snapped. 3 times. "The load balancers?" 4 times. "Then what the hell is error 5004? Nobody answered because nobody knew. Error 5004 wasn't in their documentation, it was in mine. Sitting in that locked drawer. Page 47 of the binder. Critical dependency check for decision spine integration. This error indicates the absence of authorized core logic. By noon, they'd called in the DevOps cavalry. By 2 p.m., they'd hired emergency consultants at $1,000 per hour. By 4 p.m., the entire engineering floor looked like a MASH unit, with developers hunched over laptops, empty Red Bull cans forming pyramids, and Sienna pacing like a caged leopard in designer heels. "It has to be sabotage," she hissed at Derek during an emergency meeting at 5:30 p.m. The CEO had rushed back from his golf game, still wearing his stupid pink polo shirt. Madison did something before she left. "Check the logs," Derek ordered. They checked. Every commit, every change, every line of code Madison Cole had touched in her last 2 weeks. Everything was clean, documented, legitimate, no backdoors, no time bombs, no malicious code. Just a note, repeated in 17 different places. "Pending compliance review, primary logic owner sign-off required." Ryan finally found it at 7:45 p.m., buried in the metadata where he should have looked 8 hours ago. "What does this mean?" he asked the room. The senior engineers exchanged glances. They were starting to piece it together, starting to understand what I'd done, not sabotage something far more elegant. I'd simply taken my toys and gone home, leaving them with an elaborate playground they couldn't play in. "Get legal on the phone," someone suggested. "Get Madison on the phone," someone else countered. "No," Sienna's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "We're not calling her. We're not giving her the satisfaction. Ryan, you have until morning to fix this." Ryan looked like he might vomit. "Sienna, I don't think you understand. This isn't broken code. This is missing code. Code that we apparently don't have the right to use. Everything created on company time belongs to the company," Sienna insisted. "Unless it was registered as personal IP and protected under specific compliance frameworks," Jennifer said quietly. She'd been reading something on her screen, her face growing paler by the minute. "Has anyone checked the IP registry?" The room fell silent. At 8:20 p.m., Sienna Hayes stood in a war room full of exhausted engineers, staring at a screen showing my intellectual property registration for Decision Spine, filed legally, time-stamped, bulletproof. "This can't be legal," she whispered. But it was, every beautiful, carefully orchestrated bite of it. Carl found the binder at 11:23 p.m., after 18 hours of watching his colleagues slowly unravel. He'd remembered my locked drawer, the one he still had a key to from that time he'd borrowed aspirin, and never returned it. Tara told me later that his hands were shaking when he pulled it out, like an archaeologist discovering the Rosetta Stone. "Holy shit," he whispered, flipping through the pages, then louder, "Holy shit!" The war room erupted. Ryan snatched the binder. Scanning the architectural diagrams with growing horror, Jennifer read the compliance clause out loud, her voice getting smaller with each word. Sienna stood frozen, her perfect makeup finally showing cracks, mascara smudging at the corners where she'd been rubbing her eyes. The binder was a masterpiece of documentation. Every system, every dependency, every integration point mapped out in loving detail. And at the center of it all, like the sun in a solar system diagram, was Decision Spine. The flowcharts showed how it orchestrated everything: load balancing, data routing, error handling, transaction management. Without it, they had a collection of parts with no brain to run them. Page 47 was tagged with a hot pink sticky note that read, "You probably want to read this part." It was Clause 4.3c from the Compliance Framework, highlighted in yellow, with my handwritten annotations in the margins explaining exactly what it meant. At the bottom, I'd added a helpful note. "This means you need my permission, M." Carl was the first to say what everyone was thinking. "We need to call Madison." "Absolutely not," Sienna snarled. But her voice had lost its edge. She looked smaller somehow, her power suit wrinkled, her carefully styled hair falling flat. "Then what do you suggest?" Jennifer asked. "The client demo is in 36 hours. We're supposed to show them our revolutionary new infrastructure. Right now, we can't even get the login page to load." Derek had been silent until now, sitting in the corner like a defeated king. What about legal? Can't they do something? The head of legal, Diana Reeves, had arrived at midnight, looking deeply unhappy about being pulled from her bed. She reviewed the documents with the methodical precision of someone who billed $800 an hour. At 12:45 a.m., she delivered her verdict. "Madison Cole owns Decision Spine. The IP registration is valid. The compliance clause is binding. If we deployed this to production without her sign-off, we'd be in violation of federal IP law." "But she built it here," Sienna protested, "using our equipment on our time." Diana adjusted her glasses. "Did she build it here? The copyright filing shows development started 2 years ago, with regular updates. Can you prove which parts were created on company time versus personal time? Can you demonstrate that Decision Spine was explicitly work for hire rather than licensed technology?" She allowed the company to use. Silence. "Furthermore," Diana continued, "the employment agreement Madison signed has a carve-out for pre-existing IP. If she can show Decision Spine existed before or was developed independently, she maintains ownership." Ryan laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. "She played us. She played us from the beginning." "No," Carl corrected, studying the documentation. "She protected herself. There's a difference." At 1:30 a.m., Tara sent me a photo from the parking lot. Half the engineering team was outside, some smoking cigarettes they'd quit years ago, others just staring at the sky. Sienna's Tesla was still there, but Derek's Porsche was gone. The CEO had abandoned ship. Inside, according to Tara's next message, Sienna was on her 5th cup of coffee, desperately trying to find a loophole. She had Ryan attempting to reverse engineer Decision Spine from the error logs. She had 2 consultants trying to build a replacement from scratch. She had Jennifer documenting every interaction anyone had ever had with me, looking for something, anything, that would give them leverage. But I'd been careful, so very careful. Every commit message professional, every email appropriate, every document properly filed. I'd built my fortress of legal protection brick by brick, while they were too busy playing politics to notice. At 2 a.m., Carl sent a message to the group Slack, knowing Sienna would see it. "Maybe we should just apologize and ask her to come back." Sienna's response was immediate. "Anyone who contacts Madison Cole will be terminated immediately." But the damage was done. The seed was planted. Everyone in that room knew there was a simple solution: swallow their pride and ask me for help. And everyone knew Sienna would rather let the company burn than take that step. The binder was now being passed around like a holy relic, each developer studying my work with the mixture of awe and regret. They saw it now how elegant Decision Spine was, how integral to everything they'd built. They understood, too late, what they'd lost when they let Sienna drive me away. The emergency board meeting convened at 8 a.m. sharp in the executive conference room. I wasn't there, of course, but Diana Reeves was, and she had the ethical flexibility to share certain details with Carl, who shared them with Tara. who kept me informed like a war correspondent from the front lines. The boardroom was a study in barely controlled panic. 5 board members, all venture capitalists who understood valuations better than code, sat around a mahogany table that cost more than most people's cars. Derek Vaughan was at the head, his usual swagger replaced by something that looked like fear. Sienna sat to his right, her power position, but her body language screamed defeat. The CTO, Marcus Webb, who'd been conveniently absent during Project Genesis, had been dragged back from his vacation in Cabo. Diana Reeves placed the binder on the table like evidence in a murder trial. Carl had made copies the physical weight of paper somehow more damning than any PowerPoint could be. "Explain this to us in simple terms," demanded Harrison Fletcher, the lead investor, a man who'd turned $200 million into $2 billion by knowing when to hold and when to fold. Diana cleared her throat. Madison Cole owns the core architecture that runs Veritex Systems. We've been using it under an implied license, but any modification or production deployment requires her explicit written consent. "How is that possible?" Fletcher's voice was ice. "We don't let employees own critical IP." "The employment agreement has a pre-existing IP clause," Diana explained. "Madison can demonstrate that Decision Spine's foundational work predates her employment here. She's been incrementally improving it, registering each version. We've been benefiting from her innovations, but we don't own them." Marcus Webb finally spoke, his voice rough from his interrupted vacation. "I warned you about this, Derek. I told you Madison was too valuable to alienate, but you let—" He stopped, glancing at Sienna. "Let's focus on solutions," Derek interrupted quickly. "Can we buy the IP from her?" "We could try," Diana said, "but she's under no obligation to sell." "What about the client demo?" asked another board member. "The $77 million contract." Ryan had been pulled into the meeting to provide technical testimony. He looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. "Without Decision Spine, we can't demonstrate the infrastructure improvements we promised. The system won't function at enterprise scale." "Then rebuild it," Fletcher commanded. "With all due respect," Ryan said, his voice cracking, "that's like asking me to rebuild the Golden Gate Bridge in 36 hours with popsicle sticks. Madison spent 2 years creating Decision Spine. It's not just code, it's mathematics, algorithms, innovations in data flow management that I barely understand even with her documentation." "Where's this Madison now?" Fletcher asked. "She left the company 2 weeks ago," Derek admitted. "Why?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Sienna. She straightened, trying to summon her old authority. "She wasn't a culture fit, low energy, resistant to change." Marcus laughed bitterly. "She wasn't a culture fit. She was the culture. She built everything that made us worth investing in." Fletcher stood up, all 6'4" of venture capitalist fury. "Let me understand this. You forced out the engineer who owned our core technology, tried to steal her work, and now we're facing a $77 million default plus potential lawsuits for IP theft." "We didn't steal anything," Sienna protested. "No." Diana held up a printout of the deployment logs. "At 9 a.m. yesterday, we attempted to push Decision Spine-dependent code to production without authorization. That's textbook IP violation. If Madison wanted to, she could sue us for attempted theft of trade secrets." "She wouldn't," Sienna said, but uncertainty colored her voice. "Why not?" Fletcher asked. "What's stopping her?" Nobody answered because everyone knew the truth. Nothing was stopping me. I held all the cards, and they dealt them to me themselves. "Call her," Fletcher ordered. "Apologize. Offer her whatever she wants." "I won't," Sienna started. "You won't." Fletcher's voice dropped to a whisper, which was somehow worse than yelling. "You won't. You've put this entire company at risk because of your ego. You've exposed us to lawsuits, contract violations, and complete system failure. You won't." Derek tried to intervene. "Harrison, Sienna was acting in what she believed." "Sienna was acting in her own interests," Fletcher cut him off. "And you let her because you were thinking with parts of your anatomy that aren't your brain." The insult hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. At 8:47 a.m., the board voted. It was unanimous. The call came at 3:12 p.m. while I was teaching a pottery class at the local community center. My phone buzzed with an unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Averatech's headquarters. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, another call, then another, then a text from Tara. They're imploding. Sienna's been escorted out. Security literally walked her to her car. I excused myself from class and stepped outside into the afternoon sun. My phone had 17 missed calls, 43 emails, and one voicemail from Harrison Fletcher himself. Ms. Cole, this is Harrison Fletcher from the Averatech board. We need to discuss an urgent matter regarding your intellectual property and our misunderstanding. Please call me immediately. Misunderstanding. That's what they were calling it now. The emails were a progressive documentary of corporate desperation. First, Ryan begging for help, then Marcus Webb offering apologies, then Diana Reeves with formal legal language about mutually beneficial arrangements. Finally, Derek Vaughn himself, a man who'd never sent me a direct email in 5 years, suddenly remembering my value. But the most interesting message was from someone unexpected, Sienna Hayes, sent from her personal Gmail at 3:41 p.m. You win. I hope you're happy destroying everything I built. Everything she built. The delusion was almost artistic. Harrison Fletcher called again at 4 p.m. This time I answered. Madison. His voice was all forced warmth and barely concealed panic. Thank you for taking my call. Mr. Fletcher? I'll cut to the chase. We need decision spine. The company needs it. We're prepared to offer you significant compensation for the IP rights. It's not for sale. Silence. Then everything is for sale. Madison, name your price. You misunderstand, I said, watching a child in the community center struggle with their clay. I'm not interested in selling, but I might consider licensing. Licensing. His voice sharpened. What terms? $5 million upfront for past unauthorized use, $2 million annual licensing fee going forward, and consultant rates of $2,000 per hour for any implementation support. He actually choked. That's aggressive. That's business. I checked my watch. 19 hours until your client demo. Without decision spine, you'll default on a $77 million contract. You'll face lawsuits from investors who were promised revolutionary infrastructure. Your company valuation will crater. Sienna Hayes already cost you credibility by trying to steal my work. How much more can you afford to lose? She's been terminated, he said quickly. Effective immediately. Her actions were unauthorized and... I don't care about Sienna, I interrupted, though we both knew that was only partially true. I care about protecting my work and being fairly compensated for it. $2 million annual is excessive. Then build your own decision spine. Ryan said he could do it. Didn't he? Fresh perspectives and all that? Another pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, the board debating while their empire burned. We need implementation support immediately, Fletcher finally said. Can you? No, I'm not coming back as an employee. I'll provide remote consultation to ensure proper implementation, but I work on my own terms now. Madison, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I could sue you for IP theft, and probably win more than what I'm asking. I could let you crash and burn at tomorrow's demo. I could sell Decision Spine to your competitors. Instead, I'm offering you a lifeline. An expensive one, yes, but still a lifeline. At 5:15 p.m., the contracts arrived in my inbox. Legal had moved faster than I'd ever seen them move for anything. $5 million upfront, $2 million annual, $2,000 per hour for consultation, and one additional term I hadn't asked for. But Diana Reeves had wisely included a formal written apology from Averatech, acknowledging my critical contributions and innovative work. I signed at 5:43 p.m. By 6 p.m., I was remotely logged into Averatech systems, watching Ryan and his team scramble to implement my instructions. Every error they hit, every confusion they faced, cost the company $2,000 for me to resolve. The meter was running, and everyone knew it. "Madison," Ryan messaged me directly. "I'm sorry. I knew this was wrong, but I was too ambitious and too stupid to say anything." I didn't respond, but I fixed his implementation error anyway. Professional courtesy, at $2,000 per courtesy. The news hit tech blogs by 7 p.m. A Veritech executive terminated after IP scandal. Sienna's LinkedIn profile disappeared an hour later. Derek Vaughan announced a strategic restructuring that fooled nobody. By midnight, Decision Spine was humming through a Veritech's infrastructure like it had never left. The client demo would go forward. The $77 million contract would be saved. The company would survive. But they'd never forget the day they learned that power without understanding is just borrowed time, and the bill always comes due. I never set foot in a Veritech again, not once. From my sister's guest room, then later from my new home office overlooking the Pacific, I watched the aftermath unfold like a time-lapse video of a building being carefully demolished and rebuilt. The client demo went perfectly, of course it did. Decision Spine performed exactly as designed, handling millions of transactions without breaking a sweat. The $77 million contract was signed. The board celebrated. The tech blogs moved on to the next scandal. But the real changes happened in the shadows. Derek Vaughan quietly resigned 3 months later, taking a position at a startup in Austin where nobody knew about his spectacular failure of judgment. The official statement cited pursuing new opportunities, but everyone knew he'd been pushed out by investors who'd lost faith in his leadership. Ryan Parker, to his credit, learned from the experience. He sent me a message 6 months later. "You taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. Respect the architects, not just the architecture." He's at Google now, hopefully remembering that lesson. Carl got promoted to lead systems architect, the position that should have been mine. He sends me consulting requests sometimes, always with a note that says, "Fair market rate, as you deserve." I usually accept. He was one of the few who'd seen the truth from the beginning. Tara Mitchell became my business partner. We founded a consulting firm specializing in IP protection for engineers. Our first seminar was called Own Your Genius, and it sold out in 3 days. Turns out I wasn't the only engineer who'd been building castles for kingdoms that didn't value them. And Sienna Hayes. She disappeared from Silicon Valley entirely. Last I heard, she was teaching leadership workshops in Phoenix, charging middle managers $500 to learn about executive presence. Her Instagram is full of motivational quotes about resilience and starting over. She never mentions a Veritech. The $5 million upfront payment cleared my student loans, paid off my parents' mortgage, and left enough to start something new. The $2 million annual licensing fee means I'll never have to worry about money again. But the real payment, the one that mattered, was the vindication. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't break any laws. I didn't even raise my voice. I just understood something Sienna never did. True power isn't about who you're sleeping with or what title is on your business card. It's about creating something so essential that its absence causes everything to collapse. It's about knowing your worth and protecting it, legally and ethically. It's about playing the long game while everyone else is focused on the next quarter. Sometimes, late at night, I get messages from current Veritech employees. They tell me about the new culture Marcus Webb is building, one that values engineers and innovation over politics and posturing. They tell me my legend has become a cautionary tale, whispered to new executives who get too comfortable, too arrogant, too eager to dismiss the quiet people who keep the lights on. Remember Madison Cole, they say. She didn't need to make threats or throw tantrums. She just made sure her work was protected and let hubris do the rest. The pottery class I was teaching when everything collapsed, I still teach it every Tuesday at 2 p.m. There's something therapeutic about shaping clay with your hands, creating something tangible and real. Last week, a new student joined a young woman with tired eyes and calloused fingers who mentioned she was a software engineer at a startup where her contributions were being overlooked. I taught her how to center the clay on the wheel, how to apply just enough pressure to shape without destroying, but more importantly, I slipped her my business card. In case you ever need advice on protecting your work, I said. She looked at the card, then at me, recognition dawning. You're Madison Cole. You're the one who... I'm the one who understood that my code was worth more than their contempt, I corrected, and I made sure the law understood it too. She pocketed the card carefully, like it was made of gold. The truth is, I didn't trigger Sienna's $77 million collapse out of revenge. I did it because I could see the future, a future where engineers like us would always be undervalued, underpaid, and discarded the moment we became inconvenient. I decided to change that narrative, one protected algorithm at a time. They thought they were firing a maintenance worker. Instead, they freed an architect who understood that the best revenge isn't destroying what others built, it's taking back what was always yours and watching them realize, too late, that they never understood its value until it was gone. My name is Madison Cole, and I didn't do anything wrong. I just did everything right. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment, and let's connect. If this tale of corporate justice resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Have you ever experienced something similar in your workplace? I'd love to hear your story.